Fire Sword finale. To the future. Clang! The shattering sound of steel on steel rang throughout the stadium in many places, but none so fiercely as the northwestern end. Magical projectiles and arrows soared across the battlefield, but the pair of young warriors locked in combat ignored them in order to focus on each other. One was brown-haired, wielding a hand-and-a-half straight sword as his choice weapon for this encounter. He wore a big grin on his face, despite his exhaustion, his brown eyes twinkling with delight as he struck and counter-struck, seeking an opening in his opponent's impeccable reflexes. His clothing was that of West Ferrox's make, though he left one sleeve shorter than the other in a bizarre fashion that displayed a horseshoe-like mark with a teardrop in its middle. His opponent was grim about the mouth, with long graven hair that partially obscured deep brown eyes which never stopped moving as he too sought a flaw in the first lad's attack and defense patterns. He was dressed all in black, like his one-handed sword that he carried in his right hand. His left hand he kept back, away from the furious exchange of blows, darkness shrouding in the fist as he kept his magic ready for use. "Hark! The battle nears its end!" the first swordsman panted. "A valiant effort you have put forth, good swordsman, but it is not enough. He gasped as the air was driven from his lungs with explosive force, courtesy of the black-garbed swordsman reversing his strike the instant after their blades met in a classic parry, smashing his abdomen with the hilt of the sword. The brown-haired boy stumbled back, gasping for air as his hand went up to massage his bruised stomach on reflex. The second boy, seeing the opening, didn't hesitate. Thrusting with his left hand, he cried, "Flux!" It was a simple dark magic spell, but it would be enough to get the job done. After all, he didn't want to get it carried away and permanently damage his opponent. He needn't have worried in any case. The shadowy blast hit the other boy dead on, knocking him to the ground and rendering him unconscious. As soon as he was able to confirm that the other boy was still breathing amid the noise of the cheering crowd, he breathed a sigh of relief and turned away, seeking out his new opponent. "I should see if Kiara and the others need a hand," he thought, swinging his sword back and forth a few times to keep his wrist loose. His father had often taught him that a fluid wrist can make a difference in a fight. A difference between life and death, he had more often than not reminded his son. He put the other lessons back in his subconscious where they belonged before his mind started to wander. He was in the midst of a battlefield, and competition or not, he couldn't afford distractions. "Mako!" He heard a familiar voice call from his left. He turned sharply to see Kiara and Celica taking stock of the situation, with the first girl pointing at another duel taking place not 100 feet from where they were. Even as he started jogging toward them, Celica, a blue-haired knight in training, ran off to join the fray, a long spear in her hand as she jogged off in half armor. "What's the situation, tactician?" He grinned crookedly as he came to stand beside his commanding officer. Pretty good now that Odin's out of the way," Kiara admitted. "Celica is going over to help Lilina against Minerva. Ignacio's keeping Elizabeth occupied, but I don't know how long that's going to last. You could go help him, or there's Tila fighting Yin. Take your pick, and I'll help whoever you don't." "Wow. Stick me between a rock and a hard place, why don't you?" the black-garbed young man joked. "I either go fight the Manakete alongside a Tagwell who's scared of his own shadow, or I go listen to Ignacio hit on Cordelia's daughter for maybe the 100th time. On the other hand, I do get to see him get shot down for the 1,000th time." "How can he be shot down 1,000 times if he's only asked 100? Kiara asked, her blue hair swishing as she cocked her head to one side. "It's Ignacio," Mako chuckled. "He gets shut down more often than Sir Klein used to if my father's stories are anything to go by. I guess since he was so used to it, he showed his daughter how to really make it hurt." "Fair enough," Kiara laughed. "Go on then. I'll help the little runny babbit keep from being eaten by the dragon." "Hey, upside if he loses," Mako said as he started walking away from her. "My mother makes a brilliant rabbit stew." "Mako!" The battle was won quickly after that, with the East Khan's team claiming victory over the West for the first time in 15 years. Flavia was beside herself with joy and threw her competitors a massive feast as a gesture of thanks. Of course, since the West Khan's team were all good friends and or related to the East Khan's representatives, they too were invited to join the feast. The former supreme ruler even came to party, though his expression was noticeably irritated one for most of the night. It was also noticeable that he kept his glare fixed on his son, Odin, who looked decidedly uncomfortable. The wrath of Khan Lonku was legendary throughout Ferox, both east and west, though it was known to also be tempered quite well by his wife, Princess Ylisse of Ylisse. "Hey," Mako said as he approached his friend with a mug of cider in each hand. "That was a good fight, my friend. Had it been swords only, I definitely would have lost after that Aether you pulled off." Odin laughed as he accepted the drink, slamming it against Mako's before taking a deep swig of the sweet beverage. Wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, he replied, "It would have ended much sooner in your favor were wings permitted." Mako glanced over at the semi-transparent wings on his back, then shrugged noncommittally. There wasn't any sunlight in the arena, he pointed out. None of us would have been able to use them for very long. "Hey, Mako!" A man with a full beard and an ugly bandana called as he waved over at the young man. "That was some fight, kid. You're looking more like your old man every day." "Uncle Klein!" Mako exclaimed with delight. He made an apologetic nod to Odin, who waved the matter aside and went to embrace the red-armored warrior as soon as he came within reaching distance. "I didn't know you would be here tonight," he added as soon as the older man released him. "Neither did I," Klein admitted, running a hand through his red hair, which was beginning to show flecks of gray and fiery color. "Cordelia and I were running down some bandits for the last few days when we hit the Ylisse and Ferox border. Fortunately, Raimi was in big help in rounding those thugs up, and we made arrangements for him to make it to prison yesterday. Since we were nearby, we figured you might as well come and watch the fight." "Ah," Mako said in understanding. "Where is Lady Cordelia, then?" Klein pointed across the room to his wife, who was greeting Lisa as an old friend. She was stunning as always, her beauty only matched throughout the lands by the Lightning Flash, vice-commandant of the Major Division for Elise's army. "Looks like they're catching up," the self-proclaimed samurai grinned. "Been a while since we'd seen Lisa and Lonku. I'd go and catch up with the guy, but he seems like he's taking the loss pretty hard, so I'm going to give him some room for now." Mako nearly spat out his drink as he tried to hold in his laughter at the thought of anyone being foolish enough to annoy the West Khan in his current mood. These days, the shepherds that made up the group that fought against Grima were somewhat scattered, some staying in Ylisse, while others returned to their hometowns. However, they never lost touch, and they all made sure together at least once a year to catch up and enjoy a week in one another's company in the Outrealms beach resort. After returning to Ylisse after Grima's defeat, Crom finally took the title Exalt, and Khan Basilio had retired, naming Lonku his successor. The people of Plesia, now knowing that Robin had been the son of Valadar, offered him the position of its throne, since they were now leaderless, and had heard tales of his kindness, believing that he would make a far better ruler than that of his predecessors. Robin had refused adamantly, saying that he wanted nothing to do with the ruling of a country. He only enacted 2 official commands during the month that he spent in Plesia as its interim ruler, the first being that the Grimleal cult was to be abolished with extreme prejudice. There was little resistance to this law, as most of the people that remained alive in the country were heartily sick of the power that Grima's worshippers had abused over the years. The second act he committed was to name his cousin, Henry, the new king over Plesia. Despite being well versed in dark magic, he was actually not a Grimleal himself, which was partially why he had joined the shepherds to begin with. Robin was confident in his choice of ruler, knowing that Henry's eccentricities would be tempered by his sweet-natured wife, Olivia. Again, there was little resistance, save from a few advisors who tried to say that Henry was unfit to rule due to his excommunication from Plesia's royal houses. Robin had threatened to let Henry loose on them if they didn't silence themselves and obey his cousin's commands as if they were his own, which proved to be an effective threat since apparently his curses were already somewhat infamous in the higher social circles of the country. Sayri had returned to her homeland to become the Queen of Chonsin, where she ruled to this day. Varian was restored to his former barony, and his wife Shirshir went with him, though their future son had elected to remain in Ylisse for personal reasons. All 3 of the former shepherds visited at least twice a year, and their friends were glad to receive them whenever they did. 4 years following the fell dragon's demise, Lonku's warriors had wrested power away from Flavia, much to her chagrin, and then again 5 years after that. After his 3rd win in a row, Flavia declared that if she didn't win the next tournament, she would retire from being the Khan to go live in the mountains of Valm, where she would spend her days drinking sake and throwing rocks at anyone that dared to disturb her retirement. This year, though, the children of those shepherds were now deemed old enough to compete, and both Khans had been quick to invite the talented warriors to the Tournament of Power. Accepting Lonku's invitation were his son, Odin, Minerva, the daughter of Jerome and Cynthia, Elizabeth, named for Liz by her parents Lord Klein and Lady Cordelia, and Tila, the half-Manakete child of Naui and Donal. There was also Brady and Noir's son, a boy named Altman, who specialized in healing like his father, since he seemed to lack any genetic chances to become a warrior, and his best friend Oliver, the son of Elysian Grandmaster Morgan and Laurent. Oliver had been the tactician representing the West Con, and he had put up a good fight with his comrades. However, it was well known among the newer generation of the shepherds that while he was peerless with a sword, his cousin had him outmatched when it came to tactics. His cousin being Kiara, the daughter of Lady Sachi and Lord Marth. Smart like her father and gifted with undine wings like her mother, she was a child prodigy. Under her grandfather's tutelage, she had grown in brilliance and knowledge until she was able to outwit Crom's generals in war games and hypothetical scenarios. At the age of only 12, she had been accepted by her aunt Morgan as her apprentice, so that to train one day she would become the next Grandmaster of Ylisse. She had agreed to help Flavia at the request of her great-grandfather, Crom, who had said that it was time he repaid an old favor to the East Khan. As such, she had assembled a team of her own to best her cousin's group. There was Lilina, the crown princess of Ylisse, and her younger sister, Princess Celica. Both were named after great heroes of olden times, since Crom and Sumia each wanted their children to have their own identity attached to their individual name. There was also Yin, Pan and Gaius' half-Tagual son, who had inherited his father's knack for sticking to the shadows and avoiding open combat. However, his mother decided it was time he test his martial prowess like a true Tagual, and so had given him little choice about accepting Kiara's invitation. The fifth member in their little troop was the Crown Prince of Plesia, Ignacio, the present timeline's Olivia and Henry's son. The last member of the group surprised no one, given his father's addiction to battle, a trait that he apparently passed on to his son, somewhat to his mother's exasperation. His mother and father were none other than tactician advisor Kirito and the lightning flash vice-commandant Ostina. Both of them had been instrumental in saving the timeline, and so become legends of renown among their years during their years of Ylisse. His elder sister Yui had also known a certain degree of celebrity, earning the moniker Angel Shepherd due to her skill in the healing arts and her ability to cast powerful light magic. The boy himself was named Mako, the first and only son born of his parents. Skilled with a blade, magic, and the Spriggan wings on his back, he was practically born to be a warrior, a road he walked eagerly. He reveled in using his skills alongside his legendary family to protect those that could not protect themselves, feeling a fierce satisfaction whenever he saw a broken family reunited or a village saved from a bandit raid. He did not seek to spread carnage wherever he went, but to prevent mindless killing from spreading any more than it already had. The stories of the horrors that his family had faced, and even worse, the hell that his future self had endured, kept him motivated to see a world where there was no longer conflict. He knew it was a pipe dream, but he decided that if his future self had accomplished the impossible and provided a way to kill Grima forever when even Naga said it could not be done, he would not stop fighting to make his dream a reality either. "Here's to my champions," Flavia announced loudly from atop her grand hall's table, holding up a mug full of Feroxy fire brandy. According to what Mako had heard, the stuff would take the rust off your armor, yet the newly restored Supreme Khan was drinking it like it was coffee. He noticed that several of the adults attending were unsteady on their feet as they echoed the toast, having drank the same beverage, though not nearly as much as their leader. "Now who said you could start without us?" A deep, booming voice rang out as the doors were kicked open. The speaker strode into the room, the only hair on his head or face being the gray beard he was sporting. "It's not a party till I say it is, Sprogs." "Who invited you, oaf?" Flavia demanded, though her words were hardly threatening when she was laughing at the sight of her old rival barging into her victory celebration. "I did, as soon as I heard Lonku lost my favorite chair." The old, yet still very muscular, man grinned back. Spotting his old protege, who was hiding his face in his palm, he added, "For a loss like that, I need some of the good stuff. Come on, boy, let's drink to your loss." And he made his way over to the grumpy swordsman, ignoring the man's protests as he dragged him toward the caskets of ale that had yet to be opened. "Hey!" another voice called from the door as the small group entered the grand hall. "You were supposed to announce us." "I ain't a page boy," Basilio called back. "That's what I brought you, scrawny butt, for." "Hey!" a voice that Mako recognized as Lord Rickon shouted in protest. "I'm a member of the royal houses of Ylisse. I deserve to kiss my big brown Feroxy ass." Basilio roared with laughter. Rickon let his head hang, groaning to himself as Mako made his way over to the group, excited to see who had come to celebrate the winner of the Khan's tournament. It didn't really matter to them who won. They were good friends with both of the rulers. He knew that most of them wouldn't have been able to make it, but he hoped to see a few familial faces among the familiar ones. He was not disappointed. "Aunt Lifa!" he exclaimed as he rushed to hug his father's sister. She laughed as she returned the embrace, excited to see her nephew once again. These days, Rickon's talents as a mage took him all over the nation as a respected teacher of the battle magic arts, which meant that he and his wife, Suguha, were often away from Ylisse. "I heard you won, congrats," she said as she held him at arm's length. "Your mom and dad said they were really sorry they couldn't make it, but they'll be happy to celebrate once you get back to the capital." "I figured they'd be busy," he said with a rueful grin. "It's all right. I know the work is more important than a party." "Good thing I had enough vacation days saved up," said another effeminate voice. Mako's face split in another grin as he embraced his sister, who moved from behind their aunt to receive the hug. Around them, another dozen or so guests moved into the hall, calling out greetings and cheerful insults to friends they had not seen in some time. "You did really well if you beat Odin like I heard you did," Yui added with a soft laugh. "I'm really proud of you, Mako." Even though she was nearly 10 years his senior in terms of appearance, they had always remained close siblings during his upbringing. Yui worked hard as the royal healer, seeing to Crom's family's health whenever something came up, be it an injury or one of the princesses catching a cold. This kept her in the capital most of the time, though she was known to accompany the exalted queen on an international summit from time to time. It helped to keep treachery at bay when your most powerful healer was also one of your strongest battle mages, Crom had reasoned. Coming from you, that means a lot, he grinned lightly. I just wish you could have seen it happen. I've had enough battles for one lifetime, thank you. Yui replied with another soft smile, but Mako could see the pain of many battles in her dark gray eyes. Before he could make an apology, another guest made their way over to greet him. Mako, I nearly mistook you for your father in that outfit. It was Morgan, coming over with a large grin on her face as she reached out to shake hands with the young warrior. Beside her was a tall, hooded figure. Congratulations on your win, by the way. I'm surprised to see you so happy about the fact, he admitted as he shook hands with her. I did help defeat your son, after all. Yeah, well, it'll be a good learning experience for him, Morgan shrugged. You can't win them all, can you, Dad? I prefer to learn from other people's mistakes, Robin said as he threw back his hood with a large grin. But yes, it's true that at some points or another, every tactician will fail. What's important is how you treat the loss. Will it be a life lesson or a reason for embitterment? Lord Robin, Mako said with a short bow to the older man, how does the evening find you? You can drop the whole lord thing, the former grandmaster chuckled. I'm retired, and I always hated titles, as I'm sure your father has told you. Sorry, Mako grinned ruefully. Glancing around for a moment, he asked, where are Lady Lucina and Sir Laurent? I would have thought they would be joining us if you're here. The toys were feeling ill, so she elected not to join us, Morgan explained. It's nothing serious, just some stomach bug or other, according to Yui. They should be right as rain when we return, especially with Sir Brady taking care of them. Much like their future counterparts, Robin and Lucina had twin children, a boy named Alm and a daughter named Ylisse. Unlike their future selves, though, they had their father's snowy blonde hair instead of their mother's azure locks. And unfortunately, my son-in-law is busy with his research at the Joint Ylisse Scholars Summit, Robin shrugged. I decided to come along and make sure nobody touches my wonderful daughter in his stead. Dad, I'm hardly a little girl, Morgan said as she gave him a playful shove. I can't handle myself. Let a father worry, he said as he shoved her back, sending her backwards a pace or so. And if you can look after yourself, how come you couldn't hold your own against that? Oh, dear. Yui sighed with a grin as she looked alongside her brother before adding, I suggest we get away before they get into technical terms and argue until they settle it with a chess match. Grinning, Mako followed his sister back to the table, where Kiara and Oliver were going over notes, each in their own journal, pausing every few seconds to compare and exchange some muttered words. Dear gods, it's everywhere, Mako joked as they approached. Huh? Oh, hello, Mako. Oliver grinned as he shut his book and tucked it into a satchel. Good fight, mate. You certainly threw me for a loop, taking out my best swordsman like that. Lady Yui. He stood up and bowed to the older girl, who returned a head nod. You mean second best, Mako pointed out good-naturedly. Everyone knows you're the best swordsman out of us kids. Best swordsman? Oliver shrugged modestly, even though he was known to defeat Lilina and Odin regularly in sparring matches. Maybe. Best warrior? Not even close. I think Crom and you would have had a match for the ages back when I first joined the Shepherds, Yui said while favoring him with a smile. Keep it up and you'll be Lonku's equal before long. Thanks, the boy said, blushing a little at her praise. Why is he getting all the compliments? Kiara asked with a raised eyebrow. She stuffed her own notebook into the pocket of her coat that looked much like her grandfather's, save for the color scheme of blue and silver. My team beat his. He needs to feel better. Yui shrugged. And you said, you won, so why do we need to compliment you? Also, you made me team up with Ignacio, Mako pointed out. No praises will be sung from this mouth. I gave you an option to fight with Yin, she protested. Yeah, like I was going to let you go fight alongside that guy, the boy said as he indicated the Prince of Plesia, who was currently trying to cozy up to Elizabeth, the hot-tempered daughter of Klein and Cordelia. Even as they watched, his arm was grabbed, wrenched painfully, and then used to body slam him to the floor. The entire section of the table erupted into laughter, with Klein being the loudest of them. Looking back at the others, he added, You would have been too busy trying to figure out which one of you to hit on to do any actual fighting. Okay, fair point, Kiara grumbled. Note to self, never pair Ignacio with female soldiers. Her comment brought a fresh round of laughter to the table. It was nearly the morning when Lord Marth found Mako up on the roof, humming quietly to himself. The party was still going on, though just barely. Most of the competitors were unused to drinking, and so those that did not have the resistance to the stuff they had used, save for Flavia and Basilio. Their voices could be heard even now, singing for Roxy victory songs that echoed through the halls of the fortress. My daughter was looking for you, he said as he leaped up onto the stone structure. She missed your company when she noticed your absence. Sorry about that, Mako said with a wry grin. His voice trailed off, unsure of what to say next. Dealing with unpleasant thoughts, Marth guessed as he sat next to the young Spriggan. How did you... My father and grandfather made that joke quite often, though it was often true whenever one of them brought it up. Marth chuckled. Tell me then, what troubles you? You knew my future self, right? Mako blurted out. Marth, taken aback by the unexpected question, gave a small start of surprise. What was he like? Well, Marth said, choosing his words carefully, unsure of how to proceed. Why did your parents tell you? That he was fearless in battle, Mako answered honestly. That he was an unparalleled warrior who never hesitated to stare death in the face time and time again. That he died a hero. All those things are true, Marth nodded. So why are you troubled by thoughts of him? I don't know, the boy said with a frustrated sigh. I've seen the banner with him on it in the palace, and the way he looks. I don't know how someone so heroic could look so evil, Marth asked quietly. Yeah, Mako nodded. I don't understand. If he died a hero, why remember him in such a dark image? I mean, Dad always dresses in black, but I don't think of him as a bad guy or anything like that. My future self seems so different from him, but everyone always says that he did what he could to secure our future. Again, all of this is true, Marth told him. However, just because it is true doesn't mean that you have the whole story. Then fill in the gaps for me, please, Mako requested as he turned to look at the Hero King's descendant. Whenever I try to ask my family about him, they all just seem to be sad about it, and they don't tell me anything that others haven't told me. Well, Marth hesitated, then forged ahead. Mako deserved to know the truth about his future self. The other children knew their future counterparts, or at least knew stories about them and their deeds. Mako deserved no less. I understand that your counterpart and I were never on what you might call friendly terms, Marth began. As a matter of fact, he was disliked, if not hated, by most of the shepherds, myself included. But if he was a hero, he died a hero, Marth told him soberly. He didn't live as one. At least, not for most of the time that we knew him. According to Lady Noir, he had always been an intense person in their ruined future, but the death of his sister brought out the worst in him. He became violent and distrusting, and malice ruled his heart. The only moral compass he retained was due to his desire to get revenge on Grima for the death of his sister. To that end, he savagely attacked your father when they first met, simply to demonstrate the fact that we were woefully unprepared to face the fell dragon. He dealt him a wound which could have been fatal, if not for the intervention of your mother and sister. He attacked his own father? Mako asked incredulously. My father? Yes, Marth nodded somberly. For better or worse, he was persuaded to join our ranks by Yui, which, after I could say, he became a most valuable asset. An asset? Mako inquired, an unidentifiable note in his voice. Not an ally. He made it a point not to grow overly attached to anyone, save for his sister, Marth shrugged. Mataris never did allow himself a close relationship with your parents, though eventually your father and he learned to work together in battle. He later on showed a soft spot for Lady Noir, and he seemed to regard my mother as a friend. So, he wasn't all bad? Mako asked hopefully. I think Yui had a very positive influence on him, the Lord then answered carefully. From what I could see, he allowed his darker passions to rule him more often than not, unlike our comrades that live by a code of honor. He was merely concerned with survival, no matter what it cost him. In battle, he was merciless, never giving an opponent a chance to surrender. If he was to do battle, it was always to the death. Oftentimes it was a gruesome sight. He paused as he noticed Mako looking a little more pale than normal. I can stop if you need, he offered, but the boy shook his head in the negative. I'll be all right, he said. I think. What I don't get is why everyone now thinks of him as a hero. What did he do to make up for everything that he did to hurt your cause? Or help it? I don't know. Have you not heard the tale of his exact death? Marth asked, though he already suspected that he knew the answer to that. All I know is he died protecting everyone else, Mako said with a negative shake of his head. Beyond that, no one will tell me anything. Even the historical records merely depict his death as a selfless act of bravery. But I don't see how someone that twisted could sacrifice himself for others. In a way, he did act selflessly, Marth admitted. My grandfather wanted to use the exalted falchion to return Grima to his millennia-long slumber, but Mataris objected to this plan, as did many of the other future children. However, as far as they knew, the only way for Grima to die was for him to use his own fell magic to take his life, which he would never do. But why wasn't Sir Robin... My father was Grima's fell-blood avatar, Marth nodded. He planned to destroy Grima before Grom could, and end the threat of the fell dragon forever. But you see, Mataris had another plan, one that he kept a secret from everybody but me. You? Mako asked, curious. Why you? I thought you said you never got along with him. We didn't get along, Marth confirmed. But more importantly, we could agree that Grima needed to die without my father needing to sacrifice himself. So we committed a taboo that I think my grandfather's still a bit angry about. A taboo. Mataris had engaged the Fellblood avatar from the future, protecting Yui from a blast of fell magic that would have surely killed her, Marth explained. He had developed a technique to absorb a caster's dark magic and send it back at them with its own energies augmenting the spell, to make it even more dangerous. But this time, he didn't use the dark energies that he had absorbed. He kept them locked within himself, and at first, I didn't think too much of it. He was saving it for something, Mako guessed, and Marth nodded an affirmative. He originally planned to blast Grima's avatar with it in order to kill him. But then we heard about the awakening ritual that Naga used to unlock the Falchion's true might. We also knew that whatever Naga created, the Fell Dragon would try to duplicate and then corrupt. So Mataris got the idea to beat them to the punch. Thus did we commit our taboo. You made a dark Falchion, Mako breathed. No wonder the Exalt was so angry with you two. Yeah, he was livid when he found out, and Mother was none too pleased either, Marth chuckled. He used the energies he had contained within himself to corrupt the nature of the Divine Blade, creating the Fell Falchion. When the time came, I gave it to him to wield against the Dark Avatar. Victory seemed so close. He would strike down the monster that had killed and hurt so many. What happened? Mako asked, his eyes wide now. Grima, though ignorant of the sword's true purpose, recognized Mataris as a threat to himself, and killed your counterpart before he could get close enough to strike. Marth sighed heavily. He was so close, too. So close to not only ending the nightmare, but avenging everyone that had died at the beast's claws before him. He knew going in that he might not survive, but that didn't matter to him. He wanted to have his one last revenge so that everyone he would once loved could live in this timeline. In fact, some of his final words were a request that Yui protect you. They were? The boy asked, perking up a little bit. Yes, Marth nodded. If I were to hazard a guess, I'd say that he didn't want you to turn out anything like him. Your sister, Mother, and Lady Maribel tried to heal him, but he refused their help, on the account that it was already too late to preserve his life, and that they should save their energy for someone worth saving. He wanted you to be able to grow up safe and happy, a chance he was never given. He grew up in a hell on earth, and I think that's what distorted his character more than anything else. Perhaps his nature was once a good one like yours, but was drowned in so much death and destruction that it was all but lost until the very end. So, he did die trying to save everyone around him, Mako said slowly. But he lived drowning in resentment and bitterness. Looking over at Marth, he asked, then which was his true nature? Why does it matter so much? Marth asked the young warrior. Because I don't want to become him, if that's what he was really like, Mako cried. I don't want to become a monster that only lives in people's mutterings because they're too ashamed to admit that they knew him. Marth's eyes widened slightly, but he kept his voice calm as he answered, I don't rightly know the answer to that, Mako. I could not see his heart because he kept it hidden from everyone, even Yui. In the end, I don't know that any of us really knew him. Then I could still end up becoming him? Mako grimaced. The Black Spirit? You could, Marth nodded, but I doubt that very much. At your age, Mataris was already a hard and calculating war of machine. You're a kind-hearted young man who looks out for his friends and those in need. You have a father and a mother who love you and have done their very best to raise you. And perhaps more importantly, you trust your fellow shepherds. Mataris had none of these things, so I honestly doubt that you will become him unless you wanted to be like him. No, Mako said with a shake of his head. I don't want to be anything like him. Marth smiled a bit at that declaration. You might just be the only one of the children from this timeline to say so about their future self. However, I do believe that there are some things you could take from him. Not like what, a name Bloodlust? Mako asked sarcastically. Now that sounds like Mataris. Marth grinned, causing his companion to wince slightly. I jest. In all honesty, though, you would do well to try and emulate his tenacity and commitment to a cause. Both traits are things I see in you, but you would do well to try and cultivate them. They served him well in battle. I see, Mako mused. Thank you for your honesty, Lord Marth. You've given me much to think about. Shall I leave you alone with your thoughts, then? Marth offered. Or should I alert my daughter to your whereabouts? I think some solitude would be better, at least for a little while. Mako said absently. Good answer. Marth smirked as he stepped up to the edge of the rooftop. If you told me you wanted my daughter's company up here alone, I might have decided to castrate you here and now. With that, he leaped back down to the battlements. Wait, what? Mako shouted after him. Marth just laughed as he walked away, patting the sheath of his sword as he did. The next day, the gathered shepherds were on the road back to Ylisse, with the exception of Lonku's family, who needed to remain in Rigna Ferox for at least a few more days to oversee the final transference of power, talking among themselves in groups of 2 or 3. One of the groups of the 3 consisted of Mako, Lilina, and Kiara, who found themselves talking about their future careers as defenders of the realm. I can't see myself as being very effective sitting in the throne room all day, deciding how much tax to levy out of some poor farmer every season, Lilina was sighing. I don't know how my father does it, especially after all the excitement he had in his younger years. Maybe all those years of adventure and peril made him appreciate a job where he could see his daughters on a more regular basis. Mako shrugged. I know I enjoy our times of peace. It's not that I don't enjoy the peace, Lilina argued. It's just, I don't know, our parents and future selves did so much good for the world. It only seems right that we do the same. Well, at least I don't have that pressure on me, Kiara grinned. I don't have a future to compare myself to. Neither of them seemed to notice the downward turn of Mako's mouth as he remembered what he had been told about his own counterpart. Maybe, but when Ylisse and Alm start training with your grandfather, they're going to be giving you a run for your money. Lilina grinned back, thinking of the 2 12-year-old children of Robin and Lucina. I hear they're already good enough at chess to keep Lord Varian on his toes when he comes to visit. Sheesh, already? Kiara winced. I was 14 when I first managed to beat him. I guess this means more studying for me when we get home. We could all do with some more growing, Mako said, pushing aside the thoughts of his dark future self. Although, if I remember right, we're older than some of the shepherds were when they set out to save the world. Maybe it's time we start going on our own missions, move out from under the shadows of our parents. I've been thinking along those lines myself, Kiara admitted. It would be good experience for us if we were to take a mission without the supervision of our parents. Otherwise, how are we to know our true value as shepherds? Are you certain you're ready for that responsibility? Lilina cautioned her friend. I mean, if we were to actually undertake a quest or another on our own, our lives would be solely in your hands, Kiara. I know that, which is why I haven't said anything in an official capacity yet, the tactician in training replied. But lately, I can't shake this feeling that, I don't know, we're the future now, right? So we should take the reins on it if we're going to be like our parents and the future shepherds. Hopefully no apocalyptic dragon gods pop up this time, though, Mako said with a faint grin. I like a good adventure as much as the next shepherd, but I'd rather avoid any world-ending scenarios if I can. Agreed, Lilina nodded. I say we put a hold on this conversation until we reach Glistel and have a chance to talk to my father and aunt about it in private. The others nodded their agreement, and she breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Even though they were all of age, it was a nerve-wracking thought to be striking out on their own without the guidance of their experienced elders to help them correct any mistakes they might make. In an attempt to change the subject, she turned to her black-garbed companion with a smile and asked, Say, Mako, do you have any plans when we get back to Ylisse? She ignored the warning glare that Kiara sent her in favor of watching Mako's eyes look upwards as he thought about how to answer. I think I have a few days off from training with my father and Sir Frederick, he answered. I was planning on flying to Southtown in order to pay Brian a visit. He was speaking of the current Maribel and Kellum's son, who was training to be a cleric under the watchful eye of his mother. While he had inherited his counterpart's habit of speaking bluntly, he was hardly as coarse as Brady. Why do you ask? He inquired of the princess. I was hoping you might like to dine with me tomorrow evening, she replied with a smile. There's a lovely restaurant not far from the castle that my mother and I quite enjoy. She brushed a lock of her azure hair behind her as she did so, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. That sounds like fun, Mako nodded with an innocent grin. Who else should we invite along? Oh, she fumbled, blushing harder as she realized that he had misinterpreted her invitation. I was rather hoping it would just be the 2 of us. But wouldn't that... Mako stopped right where he was on the road, his eyes wide as dinner plates. Oh. His mind flashed back to Marth's threats about what he would do if he found him alone with Kiara. He began to sweat lightly at the thought of what the egg salt would do to him if he went out on a date with his precious daughter. I do hope I'm not being too forward, but... Hey, look! The boy suddenly shouted, pointing at the sky to a distant bird. Is that a red-tailed hawk? I've never seen one before. Be right back in a bit. I'm going to go check it out. With a loud bang, he shot into the sky like an arrow from one of Orion's bows. Lilina blinked after him, a little embarrassed and upset that she seemed to have scared him off. I suppose I pushed it too soon, she said half-heartedly. Kiara couldn't help but snicker at the princess's disappointed face. That, my friend, is what we call karma, she giggled. I totally called dibs on him before you did. That's just what you get for trying to get in on what I wanted first. Can you blame me? Lilina said indignantly. He's a sweet, caring young man, a wizard with a sword, and easy on the eyes. What girl wouldn't want someone like him? Not you until I mentioned it. Kiara muttered. You were still hung up on Yin at that point, even though I told you that he and Minerva were involved. So I'm not allowed to move on? Lilina demanded. Not when I called dibs. Kiara sniffed. The two girls were raised to regard one another as cousins, and for the most part, they got along famously. After all, Lilina would be exiled one day, and Kiara her Grandmaster Technician. It only made sense for them to consistently be involved in each other's lives. However, as of about 6 months ago, their relationship had become somewhat strained by the fact that they had both grown fond of a certain Spriggan boy. They tried to ignore the situation as much as possible, but there were inevitable moments of friction like the one occurring now. If you really felt anything for him, you should have said something to him, Lilina was saying now. How I handle my relationships is not your business, Kiara replied hotly. I have never. Enough, both of you. The two girls were startled to see that Yui had come up behind them, wearing a deep frown on her normally cheerful expression. This argument is petty and childish. I expected a lot better from you two. You heard all that? Kiara asked, reddening rapidly. We heard all the shouting, Ignacio grinned cheekily. By the way, whoever doesn't get the Spriggan can always come to me for some comfort. He waggled his eyebrows suggestively until Elizabeth smacked him upside the head. I heard enough, Yui said as she brought the girl's attention back to her. I shouldn't have to explain that my brother can make up his own mind about who he wants to be with, but more importantly, there's something you two haven't yet considered. That being? Lilina asked, embarrassed at the fact that she, the crown princess of the realm, needed to be reprimanded by a healer. I'm his sister, Yui told them with a smile that sent chills down their spines. I've been a part of his life longer than either of you. If I want, I can make sure that neither of you has a chance to be with my kid brother. If I ever see or hear any of you fighting over him like he's a prize horse again, I will do exactly that. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. Kiara nodded vigorously. She had never seen the kind-hearted mage this angry before, and it frightened her almost as much as her own mother's disapproval. Why do you... Lilina was silenced by Yui's fiery glare, fixing solely on her while intensifying in its severity. There's something very dangerous in those eyes, she decided, and commoner or not, Yui Kirigaya was not a mirage to be trifled with. Yes, ma'am, she said begrudgingly. Good, the older woman said, satisfied that the point had been driven home. Now, if you two will excuse me, I have to go make sure Mako knows he's allowed to come back down. With that, she took off on shining white wings to follow after her brother. Mako noticed her approach and ceased chasing what was, in fact, a red-tailed hawk. Is it safe to go back down yet? He asked in a small voice. Yes, I've talked to them. The raven-haired woman nodded. They should both play nice from now on. Both of them? Mako repeated with a questioning inflection. Who else? What? Kiara? Her too? I'd keep an eye out for Carrie when we get back to Ylisse too, Yui said, remembering how she had caught Sully and Stahl's daughter mooning after the boy a few weeks ago. No! Mako shouted desperately. What is this? How did I notice these signs? Why did I not notice this? You're your father's son, Yui said with a soft laugh. Try not to worry over much about it, Mako. You're free to make your own decisions about who you fall in love with, whether that's one of the shepherds or a nice girl from the village. Just because a couple of girls are smitten doesn't mean you have to do anything about it. I don't? The boy asked hopefully. I mean, I hardly know Carrie, but Lilina and Kiara, I've known them forever. They're two of my best friends. I feel like I should say something to them. Like what? His sister asked patiently, already knowing the answer. I don't know, Mako admitted. It just doesn't seem fair to either of them, you know? But on the other hand, I've never given much thought to our relationship before. I've put everything I have into becoming a great shepherd like you, and Mom and Dad. Nothing wrong with that, Yui assured him. Like I said, no one can force you to be with someone you don't want to be with. Even if you choose to remain celibate, you're allowed. Don't ever let anyone else's feelings or words convince you otherwise. Okay, yeah, you're right, he said with an embarrassed grin. I kinda made a scene there, didn't I? No one was paying attention to that, the young woman laughed. They were too busy watching the Crown Princess and the future Grandmaster having it out over a boy. I think Oliver even made a wager with Altman over which one of them would get you. Ah, Mako said, his face doing an excellent job of coloring itself like a tomato. You sure it's okay to go back down there? The girls and I had words, Yui told him with a strange smile. But it's a beautiful day for a flight. I'd be happy to keep you company if you want to stay up here for a bit. Ah, thanks. Mako breathed, relieved. Then he cocked his head up at his sister as a part of their conversation came back to him. What did you mean when you said that I was our father's son? Yui's only response was to laugh. Both girls apologized to him for their behavior that evening over dinner, which he accepted with as little awkwardness as he could manage. The atmosphere was still a little tense around the campfire, but the other three friends mostly covered it by talking to the others in the group. Ah, camping. Robin grinned as he patted his stomach, which was satisfyingly tight around the middle. This takes me back to my first days with Crom and Lisa. Wasn't Sir Frederick with you? Oliver pointed out. Shh. Robin grinned at his grandson as he placed a finger over his own lips. We don't like to talk about him. I'm right here, the knight said indignantly. He had been one of the older shepherds sent to see which Khan won the tournament, much to his chagrin. He preferred to be where he could guard Crom, but the Exalt had ordered him to go as an official escort for the Grandmaster. Since Morgan was technically a royal, the stubborn knight had relented and agreed to go to the assignment. Sometimes I think I can hear him just before I go to sleep at night, Robin added, ignoring the man as if he wasn't there, reminding me that I skipped his physical fitness hour yet again. Then I give him the finger because I'm retired and I don't have to stay in shape if I don't want to. He tried, unsuccessfully, to smother his laughter as Frederick muttered something very ungentlemanlike, just loud enough for the former tactician to hear. I hear your kids keep you fit, though. Klein smirked at his old commander. Alm's becoming the ever bit the swordsman Marth is, right? Yep, and Ylisse is getting more advanced with her magic every time I blink, Robin said proudly. The future of Ylisse will be safe in the hands of my kids and grandkids. He favored Marth and Morgan with another bright smile, which they returned from where they sat together. Even though they were both married with separate lives now, they tended to stick together at social gatherings. Don't forget the rest of us, Lilona smirked at the blond man. Some of us are only the children of the soldiers you commanded in the fight against a demon, after all. Hey, let a father preen a little, Robin sniffed. A little? Cordelia snorted. You hardly ever talk about anything other than your children. Sometimes we can get you to open about whatever new subject you're studying in the Royal Library. That's on a good day. So you're saying I'm that, Dad? Robin asked, feigning hurt. Yes, several people around the fire said in unison. Good, he grinned, because my kids are amazing, and I am not ashamed to talk about it. Pfft, wish my father would talk about me in such glowing terms. Thilica sighed. Ha! Klein laughed. Kid, if you could go back in time, and not to fight Grima, please, and see your old man when you and Lilina were little, you would not be able to get him to shut up about you two. I'm pretty sure he kept us waiting on official meetings for an hour on a regular basis because he was too busy being with his daughters. That is, until Sumiya gave him one of her patented slaps and told him to do his job before the country's farms went barren. Robin snickered. Didn't she do the same to you shortly after our brother and sister were born? Morgan pointed out cheekily. I don't want to talk about it, Robin muttered, pulling his hood up so that his face was obscured in shadow. Seriously, what's so bad about getting a slap from Her Majesty? Mako asked. He had heard that her slaps were something to be feared, but he still didn't understand why. He had met the Queen many times, and she didn't seem to be all that strong. Surely a slap from her couldn't be all that bad, right? I'll give you a demonstration if you want, Celica said with an evil grin. Down, girl, Morgan told her, that she couldn't hide another grin. You'd wind up getting some of the same from a few people around the camp if you did that. Mako stiffened as his sister let out a quiet laugh, while Kiara and Lilina suddenly became very interested in their empty plates. You want to go out on a mission on your own? Crom asked thoughtfully, as he drummed his fingers on the desk. You all handled the situation of the tournament with aplomb, and that was without direct senior supervision. What brought this on? He was sitting in his office behind an oak desk engraved with the mark of the Exalt in front of it. Before him stood Kiara, Oliver, Lilina, and Mako. These four, he knew, would be the next generation of leaders that would determine what kind of militia the Shepherds would be one day. He couldn't have been prouder of his daughter and grandchildren, and Kirito's son had acquitted himself well in his combat studies. He knew that the future was safe in their hands, yet now here they were asking for his permission to strike out on their own. It made him feel a little old, the thought of handing over the reins to his progeny. It wasn't that he didn't trust them or didn't want to let them try their hands at being the nation's new guardians. Their sudden request simply made it seem more real. As you said, we did well in the Khan's tournament, Oliver began. Some of us more than others, Kiara added a trifle smugly, to which her cousin shot her an annoyed look. Before they could begin to squabble, Lilina said, The four of us have discussed this at length on our trip home. We believe that, given our recent success, though it was all but a given since we were only competing against our family and friends, we should test our mettle in a real crisis. We also factored in that we are about the same age that several of the shepherds from your generation were when you had the Second War with Plesia, and fighting bandits is hardly the same thing as fighting in a war. It's more similar than you think, Kirito said as he shifted from next to Crom beside the desk. In both situations, as a commanding officer especially, you'll be putting the lives of your comrades at stake with every decision you make. If you're not absolutely certain that you're ready for that responsibility, then you'll only do yourselves and your soldiers a disservice. We've been in battles where people have died, Father, Mako said solemnly. We know what's at stake. Besides, were you always so sure of yourself when you made out to conquer Einkrad? Or when you went to war with Valm? I was forced into both of those situations, Kirito replied calmly. Well, maybe not with Valm, but I couldn't just stand there and let these people go into battle when I knew I could help them. Then you must know how we feel now, Kiara responded. We are ready to serve our nation. We may not be perfect for the job, but we can get it done. If we can function as our own unit, we would greatly increase the active number of shepherds that can handle the situations that our skills call for. You wouldn't have to worry about sparing senior members for supervising us in the field, Oliver offered. But I would have worried parrots breathing down our necks, Crom responded. Not me, Robin said cheerfully, the only member of the older shepherds that had remained silent for the whole exchange. Everyone looked at him now, leaning back in a big comfy chair, tossing an apple above his head, catching it, then tossing it again. Morgan had called it his thinking pose when she was younger. Sorry, what? Kirito asked with a slight frown as he cocked his head at his old friend. I wouldn't be worried, the blond man said, catching the fruit from his latest toss and setting it to rest on his lap as he looked at the black swordsman in the eye. And neither should you. Admit it, Kirito, if these kids were in a position 20 years ago, they're twice as ready as we were to face everything that we did. It's how we raised them. Look, I'm not doubting their skills, Kirito said defensively, but you can't honestly tell me that you wouldn't be worried even a little? Of course there's a natural instinct to worry for our kids, Robin said patiently, but look at them. They're not kids anymore. Your son is the very same age you were when you came to Ylisse, and I certainly didn't view you as a child. I know, Kirito sighed heavily. Crom snorted with laughter, causing his friends to look at him with questions in their eyes. When he had recovered, the exalt said, I always thought that once I became an adult, I would be all done growing up. No one ever told me I'd have to grow up again when it was time to let my children out into the world. Does that mean we get our assignment? Lilina asked eagerly. Yeah, Crom, does it? Robin smirked. Hold your horses, Crom chided his daughter. It's not like you're going to get sent into the Outrealms on your first mission. Back before Grima began his ascendancy, the shepherds patrolled the borders of the kingdom, hunted down bandits and the like. I've been doing some research into a possible slavers gang operating off the southwest coast, Kiara volunteered. We were planning on bringing it to you after the tournament, but now seems as good a time as any. Doing your homework in advance? Robin beamed at his grandchild. That's my girl. Kiara giggled and smiled back at him, glad to earn such a compliment from him. Doting though he might be on his family, the former Grandmaster only handed out praise when it was due them. How much of it has she done, though? Kirito prompted, and not unkindly. This was only expected of him, since he worked for Morgan in overseeing the less than orthodox parts of the military, a category under which the shepherds fell, and mostly made up. We know that children, especially younger girls, are disappearing at random from islands and the coastline villages, Kiara responded instantly. The locals have a lot of superstitions about sea monsters and spirits, so a lot of them have chalked it up to not enough prayers to Naga to earn her protection, Oliver added. Some of them even think that the parents have done something to deserve their child being taken. Why hasn't anyone sent a request for our aid if this is happening so much? Crom asked, speaking before Kirito had a chance to question them further. I've seen maps of the area and been there once or twice. It's where Donald came from, after all. If you look at the layout on a country-sized map, sure, Mako volunteered. And you may be used to moving fast, Your Excellency, but the folk down there would hardly go whizzing about on a Pegasus from town to town every day, or even on horseback. They leave their hometowns maybe once every 4 months or so. There's hardly any contact between these settlements. Not to mention, a missing child is hardly the sort of subject that people will want to bring up in casual conversation when meeting with other villages for a festival or some other gathering, Lilina said, throwing in her 2 cents. Especially if they believe that a dark force is at work. It'll be mentioned in whispers, nothing more. We only noticed because Aunt Morgan saw that there were some recruits missing for each district in basic training, Kiara added. Nowadays in Ylisse, once a year, senior shepherds along with a knight, a mage from the Royal Academy, and a squadron of soldiers would visit various districts for a 6-week period, where 15-year-old boys would be taught the basics of armed and unarmed combat in the case of a conflict. Girls were given the option to learn healing, and if they had the skill, rudimentary battle magic. They would train in this manner once a year every year until they turned 18, when they had the option to join the military if they so chose. While it wasn't knighthood or a formal magical education, it gave the young men and women the option to choose for themselves what kind of life they wanted. It also negated the need for a mass conscription of underprepared farmers and mason workers in the event of war. You're sure it wasn't a district headman trying to shortchange us on the draft? Robin asked carefully. We're sure, Kiara nodded vigorously. It was only 3 or 4 people per district, and all of them were supposed to be part of the new group of kids, Oliver explained. Kiara said that once my mother started going through the names of the people absent on the census, that's when she noticed they were all from different areas. Why slavers, though? Crom asked with a small frown. No one's demanded a ransom, and I can't think of any other reasons to kidnap a bunch of kids. Kiara shrugged. It is an unfortunately sad truth that there's a lot of money to be made from slavery, Mako said with a wince. Your Excellency and the shepherds have done very well in stamping out most of the slave trade in our borders, but there's only so much you can do. You think you can do better? Crom asked with a raised eyebrow. You and Grandpa said it, not us. Kiara grinned cheekily, earning another grin from her grandfather. You are of Robin's blood, that's for sure. Kirito sighed. Well, snarky comments aside, it seems like they're pretty well informed of what's going on, and they have a reasonable hypothesis to go with. I'd let one of our teams to check it out if they came to my desk with this. Honestly, I'd say the same. Crom nodded with a log exhale. Looking his daughter at the eye with the brand, he said, You do understand that when you go, you're not in charge, right? Lilina seemed a little taken aback, but she composed herself before saying, But when you and Uncle Robin, I was the official leader of the shepherds, and later on, when I passed that title to Robin, I was acting exalt. Crom interrupted her. You are neither, Lilina. I'm still the exalt, which means that in the shepherds, royalty means nothing for you. It didn't for Lisa, so it won't for you or your sister. Morgan is the Grandmaster, and her place in the assignment, should you all be allowed to go. Kiara will be the acting tactician. Who she appoints as her lieutenant is up to her, but you will not be receiving any special treatment because of your heritage, which means that if you attempt to undermine her authority or take action as an insubordinate, you can and will be court-martialed. Am I clear? Lilina's chin firmed up as she stood at attention. Yes, sir, she said a little stiffly. I understand. So long as you do. Crom said after a moment, apparently satisfied. The same goes for Silica, and I'll be sure to let her know that before you all leave. So, we got the assignment? Oliver asked hopefully. Your cousin gets the assignment. Kirito grinned at the eager young swordsman. He liked Oliver and had given him a few pointers in the art of swordplay over the years. You all get whatever she tells you to do. Great, Mako said, his wings vibrating excitedly. I can't wait to get started. Hey, Lilina, Kiara said as she approached the princess after dinner in the mess hall of the shepherd's barracks. Can we talk for a moment? She had just finished giving the others a rundown of their assignment and had ordered everyone off to bed, as they would be heading out an hour after dawn. Yes, of course. The azure-haired girl nodded heavily. She wouldn't admit it to anyone, but her father's stern words in his office had wounded her pride. His blunt telling of the situation that she would be in once they were out on their own had been a stark contrast to what she'd imagined. In her mind's eye, she'd always imagined herself leading the charge against the dark forces, backed by the nation's best and brightest. It was how she'd heard the legends told of her father, how he and Robin fought side by side to defy fate itself. Now she realized that she wasn't like her father, brought up by hardship and tough decisions. Nor was she like Lucina, whose upbringing had been even more dire than her father's. She was just Lilina. I want you to be my lieutenant, Kiara said, snapping her out of her thoughts. I'm sorry, what? She said, not certain that she'd heard the other girl correctly. I want you to act as my right hand when we go into battle, the blue-haired tactician said with a smile. That's how the last generation of shepherds started, right? One madcap strategist and a stubborn exalt to be? I'd hardly call you madcap, and I doubt that I'm that stubborn, Lilina said with a returned grin. Well, we can always improve on the legend, can't we? Kiara chuckled. However, I do think that the secret to their partnership lay in the fact that one of them was a born leader that they were expected to follow, and that leader trusted his comrades to do what he did best, and guide them to victory. But, Lilina hesitated, then added, we're girls. There are bound to be some men who would challenge us simply because of that fact. There's never been a military unit led solely by women before. First time for everything, Kiara smirked. Besides, that's why we have our own boys, to knock those kinds of clowns on the head. You've already thought of everything, haven't you? Lilina laughed. All right, I accept your offer. I'll be your lieutenant. Thanks, her friend chuckled. Mind you, there's one problem I haven't figured out yet. Mako? Lilina guessed with a sigh. Yeah, the princess frowned. We could always have a duel. Winner gets the spoils. Pretty sure that Yui would murder us both if we did that, then nobody wins, Kiara said with a wince. Game of cards? Lilina suggested. Sure, but instead of cards, can we do chess? Kiara grinned. You know I would lose at that. Of course, that's why I suggested it. We should get some sleep. Yeah, we'll figure out how we can get ourselves killed in the morning, the tactician sighed. That's your job now. Lilina laughed over her shoulder. You're the assistant to said job. Half of everything that happens is going to be your fault. The next day, bright and early, the next generation of shepherds stepped out onto the road that led to Southtown, their first stop on the way to the coast. I feel like we should say something to mark the occasion, Kiara said quietly as they gazed at the path before them. And that's all she wrote? Mako tried with a massive grin. No, but it'll be all he writes, Lilina said with a playful shove. Says who? Mako challenged. He can always write more. But will he? Kiara giggled. Maybe, Mako shrugged. I guess we'll have to see if he has the time. What are you idiots talking about? Elizabeth demanded, her red wings buzzing angrily as she glared at the trio. Aren't we supposed to be moving? Why, yes we are, and since you're so eager to get going, you can do reconnaissance for the day, Kiara said cheerfully. Off you go. I feel like the moment is ruined now, Lilina sighed. Did we ruin it? Nah. Their black-winged companion grinned mischievously. We have our whole future ahead of us. I'm sure we'll have plenty more moments to remember. The end.